this unit, we're going to be reviewing scales, triads, and intervals at the piano. We're going to be creating paradigms and practicing transposition. And we're also going to be analyzing and playing a variety of music excerpts. To start, let's review some important concepts. Then we'll look at some activities that you can try for further practice. As we move forward, let's consider the following question. How does experience in playing scales, chords, and intervals at the piano enhance music making? Let's review scales. So first, what is a scale? A scale is a set of notes that follow a pattern, and typically they're moving in a stepwise motion as opposed to larger leaps. Now, a scale, as we talk about on the piano, usually we'll look at it in between an octave. So from one note, let's say middle C, to the next C, we'll look at a scale in that range. So just a quick review, scales on the piano we're going to talk about in terms of half steps and whole steps to comprise the pattern. So what is a half step? A half step would be two notes that are the closest possible position so that there's no other notes in between. So for example, this note to this note, or this note to this note, those are half steps. And then a whole step would be two of those. The distance from here to, say, this note, because there's two half steps in between. Or from here to this note, because there's two half steps again. Okay, so the pattern for a major scale, let's look within our octave from C. We're going from C to C. First, you start on C and then you go up a whole step. So we go to D. And then another whole step, and then a half step, and then a whole step, and then a whole step, and a whole step, and a half step. Let's try another example. That one was C major. Let's look at G. So first we go up a whole step, then a whole step, then a half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, and then half step. Okay, so let's keep one thing in mind. When we're talking about naming these notes, we want to follow each of the letters of the alphabet one time. So we're going to use each letter once. So starting on C, we know that we want to use D, E, F, G, A, B, and then we get back to C. Same thing with G. There's going to be some kind of a G, A, B, C, D, E, F, and then a G. So that's helpful to remind us so that we don't confuse notes of other scales. For example, we had this black key. We used all the other letters except F, so this has to be named as an F sharp, as opposed to G, A, B, C, D, E, G flat, G. That would not follow the rules to create the 7 diatonic notes. We have to use each letter of the musical alphabet one time. And this is going to make a difference when we start making chords and intervals. So, let's now talk about minor scales. We'll just start on E minor. So there's a different pattern of whole steps and half steps. So we're going to do E, and we're going to go up first a whole step. So remember the next letter, instead of calling this a G, we had to use an F. E, F sharp. Then we'll go up a half step to G, then a whole step to A, whole step to B, half step to C, whole step to D, and then a whole step to E. Okay, now let's talk about intervals. What is an interval? The interval is just the distance between two notes. So how do we describe an interval? We describe an interval with two things. The size of the interval, which we describe with the letters we've been talking about, and then the quality, which comes from the exact distance down to the half step. So let's just look at a couple examples. We start on C, and we're going to an E. So first, what's the size? How many letters are we using? We went from C past D to E. So those would be 3 total letters, which means C to E is a third. Now, what's the exact number of half steps? Well, first we go up to here. That's 1 half step. And then another half step. And then a third half step. And then a 4th half step. So there are 4 half steps between C and E. That would be called a major third. As opposed to a smaller third, let's say a third that has 3 half steps. Can you name that note? It's got to be some kind of an E, and we want it to be 3 half steps, 1, 2, 3. So that would be C to E flat, a minor third. So here's an example where those letters come in handy. They make a difference in the naming. Let's say the 2 notes were C and D sharp. Sounds the same as the minor third, right? But this time, since the 2 letters are C and D, that's only 2 letters of the alphabet. That would be considered a second. Major second is usually 2 half steps. A minor second is usually only 1 half step. So like C to D flat. But so this one, C to D sharp, this is actually considered an augmented second. It's a major second that was raised an additional half step. Now, let's take a look at triads. So there are a couple ways you can create triads on the piano. One is just by taking the notes of the scale and using those to create triads. A triad would be a chord that has 3 notes. That's the beauty of the piano, is that we can create chords with so many amounts of notes, depending on how many fingers you're using or what textures you're creating. So let's look at the triads that are created from the notes of the scale. All we got to do is take the notes of the scale, for example, C major, and we're going to use the first note and then skip to the third and then skip to the 5th. That would be the first chord. And if we follow that pattern, 2nd, 4th, 6th note, etc., we have 7 different chords from the C scale and back to C at the top. So, triads can also be created simply by knowing the pattern that you need to create the triad. So again, it's 3 notes. The pattern for a major triad is that from the first to the middle note, it's going to be a distance of a major third. And then from the middle note to the top note, it's going to be a distance of a minor third. So let's say we started on D. A major third first, we know it's going to be an F, and with 4 half steps, some kind of an F, it becomes F sharp. Then from the middle note to the top note, we know we need some kind of an A, so let's go from F sharp, we go up 3 half steps for a minor third. 1, 2, 3. D, F sharp, and A are the notes of the D major chord. Let's try another one. How about E flat major? So what are the 3 notes we know we're going to be using? If we started on it, some kind of an E, we're going to be using E, G's, and B's, right? So let's now find the specific notes. So we started on E flat, we go up 4 half steps for a major third. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is a G. And then from G, it's going up 3 half steps. 1, 2, 3, minor third. E flat, G, and B flat are the notes of the major triad. E flat major triad. Okay, let's try a minor triad. It's the opposite. Minor third on the bottom and a major third on the top. So let's try B minor. So what are the 3 notes we know? We're going to use some kind of a B, D, and F. So let's go up a minor third. 1, 2, 3 to a D, and then a major third. 1, 2, 3, 4. F sharp. That's the B minor triad. So now we're going to apply some of these concepts in some practice activities. So let's review some paradigms. First, we'll start with some triads. We talked about a major triad, so for example, C, E, G. Let's just transpose them up a half step. Each note is going to go up a half step. So from C going up to this note, E going up to this note, and G going up to this note. And if we keep doing that, we're going to be playing all 12 major chords on the piano. And back to C. So we can try that with, let's say we add a note in the left hand. Or play both chords. Or we can make a broken chord. Or we can play them in some fancy pattern. Or we can even go in contrary motion. We can do them with minor triads as well. And maybe try to make a decrescendo or a crescendo. Many things you can do. Let's talk about scales. Perfectly fine to review the notes of the scale with one finger or whatever fingers you want. Staccato or legato. Maybe one hand is playing a constant note. Or you try it in seconds. In parallel motion or contrary motion. Some other pattern, some other rhythm. So let's now work on some more intervals. We can do fifths. Maybe the fifths go by half step. Or contrary motion. They go up by whole steps. Etc. or broken. Octaves could be similar. Plenty of things you can try. Okay, you can always make things more difficult if you want. For example, by playing some rhythm with triplets. Or something, there's two different patterns in each hand. Or maybe we do a regular scale in each hand, but we start on a different note of the scale. Or one hand's going in triplets, the other is in doubles. So now let's do a composition that you can use with the circle of fifths. So circle of fifths, the order of major scales. First C major. Let's just come up with a tune. We used a basic 1-5-1 motion in the left hand. And we want to preserve those notes of the scale with the rhythm in the next key of G. So we go up 5 notes to G. And then what's the next key? D. And then we have A. We can go in this octave. And then etc. Okay, let's give that a shot. And all of these different components can be manipulated and put together, and you can use them to create a variety of patterns and sounds. Your imagination is the limit. In analyzing this piece, some questions related to the unit topics include: how can identifying triads within the melody inform your playing in terms of fluidity of the line, use of fingering, and ease in moving between registers? In measure 1 through 4, what specific strategies related to chords could you employ and why? In measure 5 to 6, how does the contour between the right hand and left hand lines influence mood? In measure 3, what specific practice strategies related to intervals could you employ and why? And what is unexpected about the bass movement from measure 6 to 7? And how does this contribute to the piece's character? So what's the big takeaway with scales, chords, and intervals? By leveraging them in your music making, the sky's the limit in terms of what you can accomplish.